Chapter 741. Osaka was a city rebuilt on the ruins. Due to geographical reasons, it was sandwiched by Beishan Lake and the Southern Bay, forming a barbell-like city layout. Beishan Lake was the northernmost part of Osaka, but the southern shore of Beishan Lake was definitely not. There were still a considerable number of residential facilities around the south-central area of Beishan Lake, and a considerable part of them were high-class residential areas. Don't be surprised why people would still build mansions here under the threat of the mutants. Basically, a considerable number of important people in Osaka used this place as a hunting villa. Especially in the past few years after the birth of the Deep Blue Walkers, the world government had basically turned from defense to offense in the wilderness. As the threat continued to decline, the high-level social mode of hunting around the lake became popular. However, this season was just the gap between the spring and summer hunting, and the hunting villa community by the lake seemed empty, with few pedestrians and relatively deserted. When the two people passed by, it was still a relatively difficult thing to ignore each other. "Good evening, Mrs. Kitayama." "Good evening. The wind tonight is very cool." "Yes." The two people passed by each other, leaving only the stiff smile of the housewife in the cool night wind. With this small detail as the starting point, it quickly became the main topic of tonight's high-class villa area. At the boring San Friends gathering of the women, many people commented, "Kitayama Yuehui, such a rude person. She's just an artist who retired from the entertainment industry. She's really arrogant. I heard that Mr. Kitayama is a powerful person in society." "Yes, I heard that. So for a long time, Mrs. Kitayama almost never went out. But I also heard that the powerful Mr. Kitayama is probably dead." "Oh, really? Isn't it? Every month or two, a car would pick her up at the door and come back after about a week. But that kind of car hasn't appeared for a long time. Osaka has been cracking down on societies recently, and it is said that many people were hospitalized and then died." Oh, so that's how it is. Then Mrs. Kitayama has been going to Mr. Jorgaman's place recently. She's going to pray, and it may be a fleeting future. Here, maybe we will soon lose sight of her." Whispers of surprise and excitement could be heard, or they could not be heard. Perhaps Beishan Yuehui, who was at the center of the discussion, could hear it, or could not. For now, she was still walking at an unhurried pace, maintaining a calm and indifferent attitude as she walked along the narrow but tidy tree-lined path. After all, it was getting late. Life in the major commercial and entertainment districts of Ban City had just begun, but for the people in this community, it was basically time to rest at home. If it were any other words, it would be very difficult to distinguish. But Okano Soichiro was too familiar with this part. He was stunned at first, and then he couldn't help but laugh. Wasn't this the prayer of the All-Spirit sect? This set of prayer was obviously adapted from Buddhist scriptures, and the editor was quite insincere. However, within the scope of the spiritual light of the Sakavai Gate, it was indeed quite efficacious. If not for this, who would pay attention to ability users like them who had their eyes on the top of their heads? He didn't expect Kitayama Yuki to be a devout believer. But in front of him, a high-ranking cadre of the All-Spirit sect, she was chanting the All-Spirit's curse. This was pandering, it had to be pandering. "Come, Mrs. Kitayama, I will teach you a more correct way of chanting. I will show you a miracle, and let you see a new world." Okano Soichiro thought that it might be interesting to put on a preaching act. But after saying so much, he was already parched by the flames in his body. He couldn't hold it in any longer. He took a step forward, reached out, and grabbed the front of Kitayama Yuki's dark blue kimono. He tore it, along with the inner lining, and even loosened the belt. Kitayama Yuki's loosened collar didn't expose too much, but the clear and perfect collarbone was another part of the sexiness of a mature woman. Okano Soichiro was so excited that he almost howled. He couldn't care less about finding a bed or anything else. His body pressed down, and he wanted to taste the cool fragrance of Kitayama Yuki's body again. But at this moment, his chest suddenly trembled, and there was some resistance. It wasn't too big, but some kind of inexplicable and strange feeling started from there, all the way back, stirring in his chest, and then coming out from his back. Numbness and slight pain, as well as the instinctive awakening of fear in the human body, surged into his mind. He widened his eyes and looked at the beautiful face that was right in front of him, who was still muttering an incantation with a unique stiffness. The second and third penetrative attacks came one after another. Okano Soichiro finally turned his gaze to between his chest and abdomen, and then he saw 3 vines as thick as a thumb penetrating into his body from different parts of his chest and abdomen, and they came out from his back that he couldn't see. Fear stimulated his spirit sense. Although he couldn't see, he could feel that the 3 vines were intertwining and twisting above his back, like spirit snakes swimming and coiling. Where did these vines come from? Am I going to die? Confusion and fear, as well as the fatal true damage, instantly took away all his strength. His body went soft, and it was impossible for him to support his body anymore. Naturally, he fell to Kitayama Yuki below him. But the 4th, the 5th. Okano Soichiro couldn't count them at all. His remaining consciousness was no longer suitable for such complicated work. Countless vines and tree roots shot out from Kitayama Yuki's messy kimono, from the originally neat tatami, and from the walls and ceiling. They were not limited to Okano Soichiro's chest, abdomen, and back, but also his hands, feet, head, and all other places that could be pierced and sucked flesh. In the blink of an eye, Okano Soichiro was held in midair by the vines and tree roots. He wasn't dead yet, and the familiar incantation was still echoing in his ears. Why is this happening? Okano Soichiro was, of course, unwilling to die in such a cowardly way. He also tried to chant the incantation and mobilize his supernatural power to save himself, but everything melted under Kitayama Yuki's stiff tone. His supernatural power was unmoving. The vines and tree roots that pierced through his body had absorbed all his vitality, turning him into a pool of muddy stagnant water. And the source of the power that killed him, Okano Soichiro made a muddy sound and tried to reach out his hand, wanting to touch the beautiful face that was close at hand. However, his arm, which had been pierced by several vines and tree roots, had completely lost its momentum. His fingertips moved forward by less than a centimeter, not even a millimeter, before they were forever frozen in midair. And under the greedy suction of the vines and tree roots, they rapidly withered and lost all their flesh in water. His body was the same, turning into a shriveled, curled corpse. Such a horrifying scene happened in front of her, but Kitayama Yuki's beautiful face was still the same as before. She just stopped chanting the incantation, and her eyes were calm and empty as she looked forward. In midair, Okano Soichiro's remains were gradually pulled by the vines and tree roots. Due to the rapid extraction of water and nutrients, the bones that supported his body also quickly lost their strength and shattered. It was impossible for them to resist the pulling force from all directions. In the blink of an eye, he turned from a dried-up corpse to an unrecognizable human shape. Then, he cracked and disintegrated. Most of the remains were taken away by the vines and tree roots and sent into the hidden garbage channel. However, some pieces of skin and flesh fell from between the vines and tree roots, sprinkling on the porch in tatami, and some on the edge of Kitayama Yuki's snow-white foot bag. At this time, the advanced AI butler had finally overcome the virus invasion and rebooted and restored its functions. This bit of human tissue debris was naturally cleaned up by the multifunction housekeeping robot that automatically activated. The silent vacuum cleaner sucked away the human tissue debris, including the bit on the foot bag. During this time, Kitayama Yuki did not move at all. It was not until the cleaning work was completed that she got up. However, halfway through her movement, she suddenly could not continue her follow-up strength. Her body went limp, and she fell on her back on the tatami that was already riddled with holes. She tried again, but even her shoulders could not leave the floor. Only her fingers and feet twitched slightly. Even in this terrible state, her beautiful and delicate face still did not change. Her eyes met the ceiling, and they were also empty and unfocused. There was no fear or panic, and there was no aura that a human should have. Chapter 742. The AI housekeeper's simulated personality was that of a mature and considerate man at home. His voice was gentle and gentle. His announcement was done step by step and carried a sense of leisure. However, the main hall and the entrance were still in a state of being riddled with holes from the piercing vines and tree roots. The mistress of the house was lying on the ground. Her body was stiff and her legs were unnaturally bent. Part of her body was still in the position of being violated. Under such circumstances, the housekeeper's announcement appeared particularly strange and comical. There were no cars parked outside this high-class villa. In a practical sense, the housekeeper's announcement was just an announcement that the AI system had submitted to its new master. Nothing more. Following the announcement, the main door of the room opened according to normal procedures. Luo Nan and Yin Lu walked in one after the other. Compared to Yin Li's vigilant and stern body language, Luo Nan was much more relaxed. He even had the leisure to struggle at the entrance, should I take off my shoes? Even though the housekeeping robot was already working very hard, the uneven-sized holes on the ground, the rubble and burrs protruding from the edges, and so on dispelled his thoughts. He stepped directly onto the tatami and arrived next to Kitishin Yuehui, who was lying on her back. He looked closely at the doll-like exquisite beauty before him a few times and nodded, "It's her." Does this count as luck or strength? Who? Yin Lu already had some guesses in her mind, but the answer was far beyond the norm. She didn't dare to come to a conclusion easily. She could only beat around the bush and ask another question, that Mr. Kitishin, that the AI housekeeper mentioned. It's Mr. Kitishin's car. Luo Nan corrected the key details seriously and considerately extracted the key information from the AI housekeeper system using the external neuron and displayed it through the projection. Anyone with a bit of common sense in this field would be able to clearly distinguish that the reference database in the system's backend was absolutely not a face or a human body's characteristic vector. The code inside didn't have the corresponding keywords at all. What appeared instead was just as Luo Nan said. It was more like a car and its license plate, plus a special electronic signal. Luo Nan spread his hands. Aside from this Mrs. Kitishin, the access control system only has that car as its reference data. In other words, other than the AI butler being polite to the mistress, the only exception was a car with a specific license plate and signal transmitter. Then, where was the male owner of this high-class residence, Mr. Beishan, the powerful figure in society that the surrounding residents spoke of? I'll send someone to check it right away. Yin Lu immediately took a picture of the key code and handed it over to the professionals of the order. Luo Nan watched the X-ray penetrate and destroy the skin, muscles, and bones, and he received immediate feedback. Several seconds later, Luo Nan shook his head. The X-ray's penetrative power was too strong for the detection of soft tissues. The detection results weren't that great. MR, on the other hand, involved requirements such as the high-speed switching of the gradient field and the detection of the state of the hydrogen atom. Configuration changes and the precision of the mental senses were all big problems. Oh, it seems like the UV level is just right. What? The absorption rate and the reflectivity are clearly different. This is a sun-blocking prosthesis. What good luck. 10 seconds later, Luo Nan was certain in his heart. He nodded slightly. There really is a layer of prosthesis, but the fusion is quite tight. It looks like a special key is needed. It should be the special characteristics of that person's soul strength. As he spoke, his mind had already cut into the cloud world. He carefully observed the target's soul body over there. I remember simulating it once or twice in the past. Luo Nan's training in the high-end imitation show on the Pacific Ocean had displayed its use. Perhaps Luo Nan couldn't change the essence of his soul, but he could use his outstanding configuration skills to precisely interfere and transform the material and mental environment. He could disrupt the transmission and reception of information, achieving the objective effect of passing off the fake as the real thing. He could perfectly imitate the mode of operation of that old geezer Gong Chi's soul strength. It would only be easier if he lowered it by 1 or 2 levels. The prosthesis that Luo Nan locked onto was the newest, deceived. Luo Nan's suspended palm descended, lightly imprinting itself between Beishan Shuahui's eyebrows. When he raised his hand, Luo Nan's naturally closed 5 fingers had already gently peeled off a layer of marvelous fog-like creation. At this moment, the light and shadow of Beishan Shuahui's palm-sized face were blurred. It was as if a layer of floating mist had been blown away. It was clearly the same silhouette, but the appearance that appeared before Luo Nan's eyes was vastly different. The most obvious change was that Beishan Shuahui's cheeks had become thinner. Her cheekbones were higher, her eyes had become slightly longer, her eyebrows had become thin and sharp, and her face had become excessively straight. This caused the structure of her facial features to become more three-dimensional, and she appeared much colder and sharper. This was a great change in temperament. She might still be considered a beauty right now, but she had instantly transformed from an elegant and exquisite doll that could be picked up and played with in one's hand. She had turned into a cast iron sculpture that had fallen to the ground, but there were still remnants of her dignified bearing. The reserve nutrient fluid within the oxygen chamber and the automatic circulation system have been completely used up. The ice coffin hasn't been used yet. And there's a curse barrier in the basement, but it has already lost effectiveness. There are also traces of rattan roots piercing through. Some of them were used for coordination, so the traces are relatively old. Some of them were used for destruction, so the traces are relatively new. So, Yinlu paused for a moment. She saw that Luo Nan didn't express anything, so she continued speaking, so I have a preliminary guess. Snake Tongue and that Mr. Journeyman once had a close cooperative relationship. Snake Tongue helped Journeyman awaken his soul and regulate his energy. And Journeyman provided protection and nutrients to Snake Tongue's body after her out-of-body state. However, Snake Tongue's out-of-body state this time was far too long. It exceeded the normal range, causing Mr. Journeyman, who protects Sakura City, to develop some sort of malice. At the very least, he slacked off in his work related to providing nutrients. Luo Nan didn't comment on the logic of Yin Li's speculations. He just mentioned, there's also the Myriad Spirit Order. Yes, there's also the Myriad Spirit Order. Yinlu didn't make a light judgment on this matter. The clues were truly too tangled. The incantation Snake Tongue chanted was the common prayer of this order. And then Journeyman appeared and killed a high-ranking officer of this order. And this high-ranking officer was someone who cultivated under the tree for a long time. It seemed that he had a close relationship with Journeyman. Then, I'll arrange for people to clearly investigate the situation with the Myriad Spirit Order. Yinlu inquired probingly. Luo Nan still didn't comment. Yinlu was a bit confused, but there were some things she needed to report. There's also information related to Mr. Beishan's car. It's a Falcon-class commercial car that people of the underworld like to use. It's parked in the underground parking lot of Ishikawa Real Estate in Sakura City all year round. It's rarely used, and the property does maintenance once a year. There's some truth to the gossip in the residential area. Starting from 4 years ago, the Falcon-class commercial car would drive out for a week every month. Its destination is this residence. But the people driving are different every time. According to the registration information, they belong to different driving service companies. They're hired to do things, and they're contacted online every time. There's very little information left behind. As for the deeper details, we'll look for the hired drivers to confirm. Luo Nan went, okay. Then he shook his head. Mr. Lo was about to be crushed by her doubt into depression. The rest are just insignificant details. Luo Nan extended his hand and fiddled back and forth in the virtual work area. Mr. Lo was completely confused. Jian isn't far. You need to take this as a warning. Luo Nan's eyes were exceptionally bright and clear before the flames ignited in the virtual work area. He laughed once more. I was lazy and didn't add the most important parameter. Luckily I haven't handed in my homework yet. Otherwise, it would really be ugly. Luo Nan spoke words that Lo didn't understand at all. He stood up and walked outside. Let's go. We need to work overtime tonight. Lo completely gave up on understanding Luo Nan's thoughts. She just followed him. But when she saw Snake Tongue lying at the edge of the entrance, she couldn't help but ask for instructions. I'll send people to move Snake Tongue. No. Don't worry about her. Luo Nan waved his hand and the veil of concealment, which was floating beside him, was cast back onto Snake Tongue's face. It automatically followed the previous settings and transformed into North Monshuahue's exquisite and enchanting face. Even though I don't want to say it, it's really too much of a pity to destroy such an exquisite and ingenious setup. Don't you think so? Chapter 744. Snake Tongue wasn't sure if she was still alive. Her soul had already been in an out-of-body state for over half a year. To be precise, it had been 183 days. A spellcaster's high-precision perception of changes in the world allowed her to be like a clock, meticulously recording the passage of time. But right now, the only reference for this ability was herself. From the looks of it, the only effect it had was a meaningless record of death. She didn't know if this had already broken the records of the inner world, but she knew that her condition was very, very bad. Perhaps she was only one step away from death. It was still the same question. Was she really still alive? Legends of undead immortals have been passed down in East Asian cultures since ancient times. Although the details were different, the general idea was that cultivators abandoned their fleshly bodies and their souls left their bodies to roam between heaven and earth. Because of this, they possessed inconceivable divine abilities. But the trajectory of their lives unexpectedly drew a parabola. At the end, they fell into the abyss of despair. Perhaps in a few years or a few decades, Snake Tongue's example would be added to the footnotes of undead immortals. But the most likely outcome for her would be the same as the swirling and tearing clouds in front of her. She would be silently annihilated without the slightest trace. One didn't need any precise perception to determine the rate at which a spirit body decayed. Her time approached with each passing day, and her body gradually lost the ability to move independently. Therefore, for the past 2 days, Snake Tongue was no longer like a spirit that followed Gong Chi around in the cloud world. Gong Chi was indifferent to this. The relationship between Snake Tongue and Gong Chi had already undergone a clear change. Moreover, it was a destructive result. On Snake Tongue's side, there was hope and despair, vigilance and numbness. On Gong Chi's side, half a year had passed. No matter how gloomy and ruthless he was, it was impossible for him to perfectly control his emotions at all times. Bewilderment, fear, irritation, and anxiety. These negative elements were like prisoners. Bit by bit, they scattered out and were received by Snake Tongue. Finally, on a certain day, at a certain moment, these accumulated elements broke through the limits of the hope in Snake Tongue's heart. The net of her will was finally unable to bear the truth of despair. Snake Tongue erupted. She questioned Gong Chi's lack of progress over the past half a year. Of course, she also questioned the substance of Gong Chi's activities here. Then, the truth of everything was revealed. Gong Chi, this insufferably arrogant extraordinary who seemed to have a card up his sleeve, was actually just a prisoner trapped in this cloudy world. The two circumstances weren't fundamentally different, just that Gong Qi's reliance on his flesh shell was a bit less, and his arrangements for his escape were a bit more stable. He had the ability user association as his backing, and so on. When all these things add up, it's actually a qualitative difference. The difference was so great that it made Snake Tongue jealous. Jealous to the point of insanity. Gong Qi had the ability user association behind him, while she was just a lone wandering soul. She didn't have anyone she could fully trust, nor did she have the strength to back up her trust. Even if she had a grade B cursemancer who was extremely rare in the inner plane, she could only carefully manage her own base between the cracks of various factions. After so many years, she had only managed to find a seemingly loyal but actually more and more unfathomable mutated tree demon. She had only managed to build a small, insignificant church with some deceptive designs. In the out-of-body state, she could use these designs to last 2 months, 3 months, or at most half a year. There was simply no meaning in continuing to prolong it. She even felt that even if she immediately broke free and returned her spirit body to her body, with her current state, the greatest possibility was that she would die along with her fleshly body. So, I can already be considered dead, right? A good swimmer drowns. The meaning of my life is to embellish those absurd legends, right? Snake Tongue chuckled softly. The emotions she felt in her spirit-body state were nothing more than remnants of human habits. Every bit of these habitual traces consumed a certain amount of energy. Correspondingly, when the energy was consumed to the point where it wasn't enough to maintain the foundation of her spirit body, these habitual traces could only be regarded as meaningless, superfluous, and disperse first. I'm already dead. Snake Tongue came to this conclusion. If she had a choice, she would have already taken her own life. But the current situation was that her spirit body was wrapped in a layer of light muslin that was hard to fathom, the muslin of silence. This reward that Gong Qi had given her in advance had now become a shackle that controlled and monitored her. When Snake Tongue was at her peak, she could still set up a shielding layer to block and interfere with her. But now she was so weak that she had to rely on the muslin of silence to ensure that her spirit body didn't collapse. Conversely, she couldn't make her spirit body collapse even if she wanted to. This strange item was gradually corroding the structure of her spirit body. As a curse master, Snake Tongue could guess Gong Qi's plans. Perhaps before long, she would only be able to continue existing between heaven and earth in a distorted form like an artifact spirit. This was something she feared even more than death. Unfortunately, she didn't have the strength to retaliate. Why had she fallen to such a state? Her reflection had just begun when Snake Tongue's subjective thoughts intentionally cut it short. She didn't want to engage in these meaningless thoughts. Apart from continuing to consume her soul force, it would cause her to rapidly and continuously approach that pitiful artifact spirit. She emptied her mind and silently curled up under the muslin of silence. She watched the surrounding clouds surge and tear apart before drifting away. Gradually, her mind became somewhat absent-minded. Perhaps dissipating like this wasn't a bad thing. The moment her consciousness collapsed might be true liberation. Snake Tongue was absent-minded and absent-minded. Her mind seemed to truly dissipate along with the clouds in this strange and despairing void. And in the chaotic prelude to the complete destruction of nothingness and the complete arrival of chaos, a color completely different from the white clouds and bloody light she was accustomed to seeped in. It was like splashing ink, instantly rendering the edge of her perception. An illogical change of situation, it was a dream. Snake Tongue had a dream. She dreamed of Sakura City. She dreamed of the shrine she lived in during her youth. She dreamed of the clear ripples of North Mountain Lake. She dreamed of the color of night that blended perfectly with the lake water. Under the hazy curtain of darkness, she calmly walked on a tree-lined road. The cool breeze that blew against her face carried the fresh scent of a fragrant camphor tree in the middle of its flowering season. Zhou Weimen seemed honest and sincere, but he was a freak that wasn't worthy of trust. It was this point that gave people a favorable impression of him. Mrs. Yamamoto snorted at her. Her face, which couldn't even be supported by hyaluronic acid, was filled with jealousy. Right, she was also Northmont Yuehui. In her early years, in order to conceal her identity, she had personally operated a fake body to satisfy the desires of a few young girls. That was an age of freedom. She could freely switch between two identities, and she could casually tease those foolish people who were drowned in money, beauty, and power. Now that she thought back to those days, she felt that they were quite pleasant. But unknowingly, her happy life had ended. It was probably after she became a B-rank curse mage that she began to have even greater ambitions towards cultivation. She wholeheartedly worked hard to climb even higher peaks. Snake Tongue, who was also Northmont Yuehui, had returned home while drifting through her memories. Up until now, everything had been fine. She put down her handbag and bent over to change her shoes. In the next moment, the attack arrived. Snake Tongue was absent-minded once more because her instinctive reaction was completely ineffective. Her defensive counterattack had been completely reduced to nothingness. And what appeared before her eyes was a scene that seemed so real that it bordered on absurdity. That's right, am I dreaming? This dream was so real that it caused one to tremble. Snake Tongue dreamt that Northmont Yuehui was walking like a normal person between the residence and the distorted camphor tree. This was the pilgrimage route that she had planned out. This meant that her fleshly body had already entered the most dangerous stage. She had to accept the protection and energy injection of Georgia Wei men. She also dreamt that Northmont Yuehui had been infiltrated and violated. The irony was that the intruder was actually a high-ranking cadre of the myriad spirit order that she had single-handedly created. Georgia Wei men had made a move. This was within reason. But it could be seen that after that bastard had seized the life of a high-ranking cadre of the order, he hadn't left Northmont Yuehui any leftovers. And when the chaotic situation ended, only Northmont Yuehui remained in the messy residence. This was her body, which had exhausted the last shred of its strength, making a final struggle. It can't be like this. I have to get up. Snake Tongue had enough of this dream. She could imagine the fate of her body in her mind, but she really couldn't bear to see such a realistic and absurd scene play out before her eyes. At this moment, she merged with Northmont Yuehui and struggled with all her might, even though she knew that struggling in a dream was meaningless. Then, it moved. Her fingertips moved. In the dream, Northmont Yuehui was dumbfounded. In the cloud world, Snake Tongue was also dumbfounded. The entire world, regardless of whether it was real or fake, seemed to freeze. Countless thoughts rose and fell in succession. She pushed Snake Tongue to try again and again, but the result made her go crazy. What was this? What was this? If she was watching a movie that had nothing to do with her, if she was only going to endure the torture of the scene, then Snake Tongue would have accepted it. But what was going on with this ambiguous situation? She could control her body and had that tiny bit of reaction, but she simply didn't have the feeling of her soul fusing with her body. It was like she was using a game controller to control a character in a game. Half of her body didn't respond, but the other half sent back clear feedback. It was nothing more than feedback, nothing more. It wasn't any more meaningful than the vibration of the controller. Her soul body was still in a detached state, and her body couldn't receive the warmth and nourishment of the supernatural power. Everything seemed to be separated by a thin and hard layer of glass. All she could do was constantly wipe away the moisture that she breathed out, making the scene in the dream a bit clearer. She used this illusory reality to torture herself a bit more crazily. Apart from this, there was nothing. Nothing at all. In reality, the centaur in the real world was grabbing his shoulder and shaking him violently. The shaking made the 1 kilogram of alcohol that he had just poured into his mouth want to be sprayed onto the ugly face in front of him. If that happened, he would be dead for sure. Fan Lu decided to go out and sober up. He could actually dream of this centaur. If he continued to play with this lunatic, he might take the initiative to drill into the gene modification room. He covered his mouth and waved his hand to push away the centaur. He hurriedly got up and walked out. However, just as he took a step, he was grabbed by the back of his collar and forcefully pulled back. At the same time, another 1-kilogram bottle of brandy was forcefully stuffed into his mouth. Woo woo woo, the centaur laughed loudly until his entire face was distorted. At the same time, he didn't forget to call out to the various beauties in the room, "Take off his pants, let's celebrate. Also, whoever gets this guy's belt, no matter how much other venues offer, I will pay them all. That girl will be the queen tonight." The 7 or 8 women in the private room screamed at the same time. The next moment, Fan Lu, who was drunk, was drowned by the pink arms and legs. His eyes rolled up, and his remaining consciousness asked the ultimate question in the world: who am I? Where am I? Chapter 745. April 28, 2097. It was the weekend and the moon was waning. However, it was still a bright moon that did not fall at night. Whether it was on the shore or on the lake, the view was flat. The lake and the sky seemed to be devoid of dust. In Banqing, such moonlight was said to be able to shine through the Beishan Lake and reach the ruins of the ancient capital under the lake. Therefore, many Banqing residents went on a family trip to the Beishan Lake to enjoy the scenery of moon overlooking Mountain Island. There were also people who set off fireworks or took a boat to the lake until the latter half of the night. Thanks to the moonlight, the incense of Mr. Zoe Jiawei was also very strong these 2 days. The clusters of white flowers on the branches and leaves seemed to be able to store moonlight, which contrasted with the green leaves. It was dazzling. Yinlu stood on the top deck and looked at the lakeside where the figures were gradually thinning out. Most of them were looking at the special camphor tree. She was only 2 or 3 kilometers away from the lakeside. The person on the shore must have also noticed this. The aquatic plants near the shore also seemed to be very active, rippling light waves in the shallow water. A very cautious guy. Yinlu had no intention of challenging Zoe Jiawei's vigilance. Speaking of which, it should have been scared out of its wits in the past 2 days. Well, the surrounding residents were actually not having a good time. However, everyone was muddle-headed and forgot everything when they woke up. If you insist on being isolated from the world, then you can't blame others. With a smile, Yinlu sent a signal to the crew. The ray yacht turned around. Like a dolphin, it swam on the sparkling Beishan Lake, showing off its skills and breaking through the waves. Soon, it left the trees and stone embankment on the southern shore behind. However, at this time, Yinli's mind still maintained a vague connection with the other side. She herself did not have this ability. What she relied on was the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss district. It was through the magic of the Blood Soul Temple that she could collect the restless emotions that were constantly gathering and pressurizing in the relatively vast area on the southern shore of the Beishan Lake. It originated from the dream. In front of Yinlu, the virtual workspace was always lit, forming a beautiful light-color balance with the sprinkling moonlight. In addition, a virtual keyboard was also projected. Yinli's slender fingers danced on the keyboard as she drafted the letter. Yinlu chose to use this retro method to sort out what she had done, experienced, and guessed in the 3 days since she arrived in Banqing City. She wanted to find a connection and better explain it to her boss, who was thousands of kilometers away. So far, only 25% of the total budget of the operation has been spent. Practically every item is below expectations. Aside from the basic consumables, this item has already exceeded the budget by 4 times. Mr. Luo Nan has displayed astonishing efficiency, both in the way he arrived in Banqing City and in the way he acted after arriving. It only took him an hour to achieve the basic goal that he had set in the beginning. All the time that followed was spent on arduous and monotonous cultivation and experiments. Yin Lu finished inspecting the draft from before. She pondered for a bit before continuing to write. I believe that Mr. Luo Nan possesses a type of talent. There is certainly a logic system within his brain that we are unable to comprehend. I have eliminated words like divinity, omniscience, and so on. This is because I have seen Mr. Luo Nan repeatedly make inconceivable judgments. He takes a long time to think and then verify things. He still retains the habits of thinking similar to humans, but his methods are very different. Right now, the yacht had slightly changed its direction, and the angle of the moonlight was slightly different. The virtual workspace automatically adjusted the brightness of the colors, forming a faint wave-like fluctuation. The speed of Yin Li's fingers was not affected. On the contrary, when it came to the current domain, the magical experiences of the past few days surged up in her mind, forcing her to not even think about words and forming sentences. She only wanted to pour out her thoughts. I have seen at least 2 different modes of thinking related to Mr. Luo Nan's thinking. The first one is the configuration of thinking that the order needs the most urgently. I believe that Mr. Luo Nan already possesses a highly mature system model in this domain. In his eyes, all material and mental structures, including the forms of actions of supernatural powers, can be classified as configuration problems. I have mentioned the complex relationship between snake tongue and the mutated camphor tree. I hope that my description won't cause you any trouble. In fact, the words I use to express myself are merely a clumsy description of the configuration diagram that Mr. Luo Nan drew. Yin Lu didn't bother to express anything here. She just inserted the 3D configuration diagram that Luo Nan had drawn 2 days ago in response to this problem as an attachment. The automatic layout effect was very dazzling. Even the plain text seemed to jump. The maze-like configuration diagram didn't show the image of a large tree or a beauty at all. It was more like the perspective diagram of some kind of complicated machine. According to Luo Nan, the diagram included the dynamic energy of Snake Tongue's body and the camphor tree that was several kilometers away. It also included the interaction of this model with the surrounding environment. They could be direct and orderly arranged. They could be disassembled and reassembled. They could be optimized according to a set of rules, forming a system that was even more closely related. These were all Luo Nan's explanations and demonstrations. Yin Lu could only accept and copy everything. After doing all this, Yin Lu quickly got rid of this domain that she wasn't good at. She began to talk about another matter that she was more concerned about. It was also a peculiar process that she was still pushing forward. As for the second type of thinking program, perhaps you have already seen some clues from the changes in Blood Soul Temple. In the past few days, the emotions of the residents of Banqing have been very restless. The order even took the opportunity to develop a few shallow believers. These changes originated from Mr. Luo Nan. He is using a method similar to the dream entering technique to smear the dreams of the people of Banqing. He calls this method creation. The following is a related work. Yin Lu inserted the second attachment. This was a psychic diagram that Luo Nan had created last night. The scene on the diagram was relatively abstract. From Yin Li's point of view, Luo Nan had drawn a stormy weather on the sea. The silhouette of a giant ship teetered on the crest of the waves. But the most eye-catching thing on the diagram was the 3 sets of dusky pillars of air. They were like 3 scattered sea tornadoes, occupying more than half of the space in the diagram. Luo Nan didn't deliberately hide his methods. He even took the initiative to invite Yin Lu to look at it. He said that she could interpret it from many angles. This was why Yin Lu dared to pass this psychic diagram to Lady Holder. She even added her own judgment. She didn't try to forcefully interpret the psychic diagram. Instead, she talked about her impression of Luo Nan as a whole. I feel that Mr. Luo Nan has a strange sense of dislocation. He clearly possesses inconceivable talent and ability. He also firmly believes in his own unique logic system. But he often unconsciously underestimates his own strength and the effects of his actions when making specific judgments. With Mr. Luo Nan's perception and judgment, this sort of dislocation shouldn't have occurred. Perhaps there is a problem with the frame of reference he chose. I believe that Mr. Luo Nan is currently facing enormous pressure. From what I've seen, he's abandoned all forms of entertainment in Banqing. Aside from those thoughts that are hard to understand, he's engaged in high-intensity training between the two energy centers. He's extremely nervous. He's as taut as a bow. It's as if he's going to fight a life-or-death enemy at any moment. But the horned demons that have been running rampant these past few days simply don't have the qualifications to become his enemy. I'm unable to determine where his enemy is coming from, but the bottom line of my judgment is that it's an extraordinary level character. The tough body surpassed the rippling clear water and crushed through the nearly empty transparent air. It slowly rose between the lake and the sky illuminated by the bright moon. It floated in midair. Under the low-power stealth mode, the maglev and jets were always in a closed state. The gloomy multifunctional stealth coating swallowed and distorted the moonlight, making this combat machine appear like a malevolent and oppressive demon. But the surrounding air and lake water faintly resonated. It was as if it had turned into an exclusive choir, singing together in praise of majesty and holiness. What was truly interesting was the throbbing lightning formed by the contrast of light and dark between the layers of clouds, the waves, and the pillars of air. They embodied the tension of the storm in the painting. If one were to analyze it in depth, it would represent some sort of conflict, but it would also represent some sort of connection. Especially between the two pillars of air of Gong Qi and Luo Yuan, the lightning trajectories interweaved particularly tightly. Fan Lu didn't understand for a moment. He was even more baffled as to why this fellow, the horned demon, suddenly followed him. Speaking of which, although the transaction with the Toyama auction house was done under the name of the horned demon, it actually had nothing to do with him. The airport wouldn't even notify him of the transfer, but this fellow, the horned demon, gave a rare explanation. I suddenly had some inspiration in that laboratory. I want to go there to verify it. I'll take the next transport plane there. Fan Lu felt his scalp hurt. It's not like you haven't been to that place before. It is not big, and now half of it has collapsed. If such a big transport plane goes there, it will definitely be empty. How can there be another one? Then arrange one for me. Hiss, you know the environment over there, right? I don't need to emphasize how unstable it is. This transport plane is originally rushing for time. They are waiting at the last moment. Now, even if I arrange one for you, there is a high probability that it will be transferred again. You won't be able to find the entrance even if you go there. Why bother? You idiot, why do you care about me? I was the one who found the entrance. Fan Lu's good intentions were trampled into the mud by the horned demon. No matter how good-tempered he was, he couldn't help but explode. You found it. Ha, as early as 20 years ago, we were there. I was also the one who found it 20 years later. Hee, that place has always been under Wu Jun's control. You snatched it. That was also found by me. Fan Lu finally realized that he had nothing to say to a madman, so he could only use the delaying tactic. I have to inform Mr. Luo Yuan first. As Fan Lu said, he turned around to leave, but his neck was clasped by the fingers of the horned demon when his body only turned halfway, and he was forcibly pulled back. As the force penetrated, the blood vessels, nerves, and bones in his throat were squeezed and twisted. His vision turned black, and he almost fainted. What are you doing? Xiao Zhao was shocked. He wanted to come over to save him, but he was kicked by the horned demon and flew 10 steps away. He fainted directly. This time, the appraisal and transfer work on the transport plane was suddenly interrupted. Several appraisers from the Toyama auction house not far away were stunned. The security personnel they brought raised the firearms in their hands and aimed at the horned demon who had already lifted the person halfway. The atmosphere was so tense that it could collapse at any time. Damn! Fan Lu knew that the horned demon was a dog. He would turn his face at any time, but he didn't expect the most ruthless bite to bite him directly. His vision turned with difficulty, trying to save himself. The security of the Toyama auction house couldn't be counted on, but at this time, he was on the transport plane. Some of the passengers here were the products of the gene exchange. Damn it, with his current state, unless Luo Yuan's attention was on him, there was no chance at all. The horned demon completely ignored the outside environment and the changes in the atmosphere. He only put his deformed and distorted face in front of Fan Lu. Don't you understand? I found it, and I should have special rights there. Fan Lu's brain was already hypoxic. He slapped the horned demon's arm hard, but the latter just talked to himself. These days, I have a lot of inspiration, especially when I am dreaming. I can feel some kind of wonderful guidance from those flying fragments. They may combine into the most wonderful answer at any time. Do you understand that feeling? Oh, I forgot that you can't speak. The horned demon finally let go, and Fan Lu fell directly to the ground. His whole body was soft, and he only knew how to cough and retch. The horned demon didn't mind squatting beside him and patted his shoulder and back. I know you are very busy doing odd jobs. It is very difficult for you to understand this kind of mysterious state, so you don't need to waste any more effort. I make a request, and you just need to agree. Everyone can relax. Fan Lu repeatedly chopped the horned demon 100 times, 1,000 times in his heart, but he still had to act nice on the outside. He made his final persuasion with a hoarse voice, you can wait a little longer. In a month, no, in half a month, you will have a lot of time to research, with that baby who is still drinking milk. I'm saying that you don't need to try your luck and find the door. The horned demon's finger pressed onto Fan Lu's neck. I say, little Fan. Even though we have been kindred spirits quite a few times, you still don't understand. Luck is my attribute. You don't need to worry about such a boring thing. Give me a definite answer. Do you agree or not? Fan Lu coughed a few more times. He wanted to speak again, but his head had already been forcefully snapped down by the horned demon's monstrous strength. He nodded twice. The horned demon's voice came over, excellent. Happy cooperation. Thousands of kilometers away, Luo Nan began to chuckle. Yin Lu, who was right next to him, massaging his shoulders, felt strange. She leaned back slightly, Mr. The soft sensation on Luo Nan's shoulders and even the side of his cheeks left. His mind instantly became empty, but it was soon filled with more important matters. You said that you had spare materials for the transmission array you built last time. Yes. Chapter 748. The medium-sized transport plane flew through the night, advancing all the way inland, but in the end, it still couldn't outrun the sun that rose from the horizon. The transport plane that flew all the way from Huqing finally arrived at the relevant airspace when the first light of dawn silently spread over thousands of miles of wasteland. From beginning to end, the cabin of the transport plane was empty. Everyone was in the cockpit. Of course, there were only 3 people on the entire plane, the pilot, co-pilot, and the centaur. As a bad customer who forced his way onto the plane, the centaur was self-aware and clearly showed his distrust of the 2 crew members. He was nailed in the cockpit until the transport plane arrived at the destination he hoped for. What was strange was that the cabin was empty along the way, and the cockpit was quiet. The centaur, who always had the talkative attribute, actually kept his mouth shut. If one didn't look back, one wouldn't be able to feel his existence. If silence could be accumulated, the transport plane would have crashed halfway due to severe overload. After finally reaching the target airspace, the centaur finally said, "Descend." The transport plane penetrated the clouds and continued to descend. Looking out from the porthole, the slightly undulating red soil of the wasteland below was already the kind that the centaur was familiar with. He looked at the instrument panel on the transport plane and converted the angle of the sun. The centaur was finally satisfied and patted the shoulders of the two pilots. "Very good, maintain this height. We will hover for a while. Pay attention to the mutants. It shouldn't be a problem for you." As the centaur said, at an altitude of about 6,000 to 7,000 meters, the population and number of flying mutants couldn't be underestimated. Hovering around was not a good choice. However, neither the pilot nor the co-pilot spoke. They just followed the centaur's instructions and began to hover at high altitude. They skillfully avoided several waves of flying mutants that passed by. This continued for about 20 minutes before the centaur finally stopped. "Very good, very agile," the pilot and co-pilot remained silent. As the products of the gene exchange, they were the most capable subordinates and executors. The centaur's praise was completely wrong. Of course, the centaur didn't care. After saying that, he left the cockpit and walked into the rear cabin. At the same time, he gestured for the cabin door to be opened. "I won't trouble you with the landing. Let's have a pleasant cooperation. See you next time." As the hatch opened, the cold and strong airflow from the high altitude went straight in. The centaur faced the whistling wind, closed his eyes, opened his arms, and jumped down without hesitation. Only his sharp whistle was left in the cabin. In the cockpit, a radar alarm sounded. The co-pilot could clearly see through the monitor screen that almost at the moment when the centaur jumped off the transport plane, a huge shadow swept past the bottom of the fuselage and converged with the centaur's figure, then it dived at high speed. The pilot and co-pilot looked at each other. Without saying anything, they flew the plane back. The centaur, who made a leap of faith from the transport plane, stood steadily on the back of a pterosaur. This high-altitude mutant, known for its ferocity, was uncomfortable with the sudden weight on its body, but it only slightly twisted its long neck and maintained a relatively stable posture. Then, it spiraled down. After just 3 minutes, the centaur truly set foot on the sun-covered wasteland, and the pterosaur, which was a temporary vehicle, flew back into the sky and disappeared in a blink of an eye. Deterred by the huge size of this high-altitude predator, dust and smoke rose from all directions in the wilderness. Some of the small animals that were swimming around in the surroundings fled in all directions. Some of them lost their normal rhythm and quickly became the breakfast of the strong. The food chain of survival of the fittest was simple and straightforward. It didn't require any brains at all, and it was most favored by the centaur. He looked around and glanced at this wilderness full of wildness and vitality. Of course, it was full of cruelty. He grinned and stood there with his arms crossed, waiting quietly. In just a few minutes, the pterosaur just now returned. From its broad shoulders, 3 figures jumped down one after another. One of them just landed on the ground, and he took the opportunity to punch directly into the rippling red ground. Half of his arm was deeply stuck in the ground. He then raised his hand, and his fingers had already pierced between the head and neck of a giant viper that was as thick as a human thigh. Red and green body fluids mixed together, flowing on the snake that had been caught but was still twitching violently. Then, the snake was thrown everywhere. Amidst the protests of the others, the snake catcher didn't say a word. He stuffed the fat viper together with his own arm into the long mouth of the pterosaur that landed next to him. The sharp teeth of the sharp-beaked pterodactyl habitually scraped the food, instantly turning the venomous snake into strips of meat. When the tip of the teeth scratched the snake catcher's arm, which was even thicker, it did not leave the slightest mark. After feeding, the snake catcher slapped the pterosaur's head, almost causing this top meat-eater that looked like the reincarnation of a dinosaur to fall down. So, the pterosaur soon flapped its wings and flew into the air again. In the blink of an eye, it flew high and disappeared. It felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from the completion of the mission, but it also felt as if it had fled far away. The snake catcher was undoubtedly the strongest among the group. The centaur probably only reached a position slightly below his chest. When the sharp-beaked Quetzalcoatl was used as a vehicle, it probably put most of its strength on this person. It was only natural that it ate the food he fed. The centaur was quite afraid of this giant. It kept staring at him, and after confirming that the giant didn't say anything else after feeding, it turned its gaze to the other two. Apart from the giant, there was also a middle-aged man who was as thin as a monkey. As soon as he landed, he squatted by the side and fanned himself. His curled-up body felt like it was too small to fit on the giant's shoulder. His actions were extremely jumpy, which was really unworthy of his face that had been through the vicissitudes of life. He stuck out his tongue and shouted, "Hot, hot, hot." His face was red as if he had a heatstroke or taken drugs. The centaur was more familiar with this person, so he took the initiative to greet, "Monkey, how many did you drink today?" Monkey spat, 10 little blue balls. I was brought over by Fatty Dragon before I could get it. I can turn the earth upside down now." As he spoke, he glanced at the giant who created the shadow on the side, but he didn't continue. As for the last one, even in the wilderness, he was still wearing a suit as if he had just walked out of a business banquet. A bow tie, a watch, and a pair of shiny leather shoes. Everything about him made him look like a well-dressed person. At this time, the fastidious person looked down at his watch and frowned. "We are about 20 minutes later than the scheduled time. There's no time to chat now. Remember, we are here to receive the secret auction results. It has nothing to do with the centaur. That's why, you stubborn fatty dragon, you should have listened to me just now and released the germs separately. That way, everyone wouldn't have to trudge around on foot. You should know that every minute in the wilderness, the amount of viruses and germs we inhale is more than 200 times that of a big city. And this damn soil." With that said, the fastidious person turned around to leave, but before he could take a step, his shoulder was hooked by the centaur. The two men's faces were almost stuck together. The latter didn't care how disgusted the fastidious person looked and whispered in his ear, "I heard that your good friend, Brain Demon, died. It doesn't matter if he died, but where is Wu Jun or a family that can threaten me? This is your plan, right, flour sausage? Call Jingxin." Fastidious person Jingxin pushed the centaur away in annoyance. He even used his fingers to wipe off the dust on his shoulder. There are always accidents in everything. We have been trying our best to find her these few days. We even caught 2 of the upper echelons of the small parish for questioning, but Wu Jun seems to have disappeared. Then what about her child? Chapter 749. 3,500 kilometers away from some inland wasteland, Ban City's time zone was pushed forward by 3 hours. When the first glimmer of dawn appeared over the wasteland, the sun was already high in the sky over Ban City. Today was Monday, the first working day after the weekend. Due to the barbell structure of the city, which was short from north to south and long from east to west, the many layers of traffic in the east and west of Ban City sunk into a busy and congested predicament. Temporary drainage channels were opened on North Mountain Lake. The military and police were mobilized on a large scale to suppress the mutant population on the lake, allowing for flying cars to shuttle through. The humming sound of engines resonated through the horizon. The tranquil and leisurely scenery of last night was nowhere to be seen. During this busy time, the 2 passengers on the yacht drifting on North Mountain Lake entered a working state. The sunlit area on the top deck was supposed to be a leisure area, but it had now become a temporary work area. Whether it was Luo Nan or Yin Lu, they were both immersed in writing and data. They were extremely busy. Luo Nan had been writing and drawing from the moment he entered this state. His brush moved like it was flying. He sketched one character after another and handed them over to Yin Lu for intelligence gathering and analysis. Actually, the technology of telepathic transcription had long since matured in this era. Luo Nan could completely use the relevant technology to reproduce the images of his mental clairvoyance into electronic information and search it directly. No matter how lifelike the sketches were, they were still separated by a layer. This kind of method affected Yin Li's efficiency quite a bit. It made her do a lot of extra work. However, the secretary had to accept the willful choice of the boss. Yin Li didn't have any thoughts of complaint in her heart. After all, this was a real-time image from several thousand kilometers away. Even though Yin Li knew that Luo Nan possessed the ability to mentally travel 10,000 kilometers, it was still hard for her mind to not be shaken when she truly experienced it from a different angle. It was still the same saying. Omnipresent. It was practically omniscient. It was omnipotent. Plus, Yin Li knew that Luo Nan's sketching technique was related to his clairvoyance and analysis of his targets. It contained deeper details. Therefore, she didn't feel the slightest bit of pain. She just earnestly sorted out the images Luo Nan drew and organized them. At the same time, she mobilized the Blood Flame Order's accumulated database over the years to distinguish, analyze, and determine the nature of these characters. She promptly reported them. The one in the Jeep, Kevin Gardner, a self-proclaimed ranger with a B-rank fleshly body. Mr. Bai had once misinterpreted it as the attached soul state. He could switch back and forth quite freely, seeming to be able to jump back and forth within a radius of 100 kilometers. Even with the restriction of needing a life vessel, Fatty Dragon's monitoring range was the widest that Luo Nan had ever seen, aside from himself and a few other mental extraordinaries. Anyone would think that Fatty Dragon was of the fleshly side just by looking at his build, but his attainments in the mental side were quite deep. Luo Nan took the information provided by Yin Li and sized it up seriously. Yin Li explained in a soft voice to the side, providing some unclear details of the information. Fatty Dragon is the backbone of the Amaterasu order. He is also one of the high-end thugs. He was mentally retarded in his early years, but the true god of the Amaterasu order personally enlightened him and unlocked his innate talent. Since then, he has been out of control. In a short 6 or 7 years, he has already stably occupied the top 200 of the various inner world rankings, and he is still rising. In terms of combat strength alone, some people call him the Eye of Truth Fairchild of the Order of Justice and the Secret Wheel of Life Master Fan of the Eye of Secret Contract. They are known as the 3 heroes of the Secret Order. And these 3 seem to be drifting away from the core decision-making circle for various reasons. In any case, Fatty Dragon's existence has clearly raised the level of this transaction. Luo Nan nodded. So this person needs to maintain a distance from the Horned Demon. Otherwise, the other participants will certainly have misgivings. Yin Lu also agreed with this judgment. She then said, as for the other 2, Monkey Horse was born in the wilderness. He is lecherous and bloodthirsty. He is a notorious savage among the vagabonds. He is also a frequent guest on the official wanted list. I don't know when he joined the Amaterasu order. This time, he probably needs to conceal his identity and give others a surprise attack. As for that Jingxin, it's quite strange for him to have a relationship with the Amaterasu order. His official identity is a wilderness ecology expert at Hood's Wilderness Laboratory. At the same time, he is also a member of the Ability User Society. He also has a professional technical position at headquarters. I'm afraid that Abner's expression won't look too good when this news gets out. Abner was the president of the Ability User Society headquarters. He was nominally the representative and leader of the entire world's ability users. Luo Nan had already seen him a few times from afar through the mental sensing network. He could more or less imagine what that person's expression would look like when he said that. He grinned and then furrowed his brows. The Amaterasu order has pulled out many hidden strings. They are completely determined to win this transaction. If they have this kind of determination, they can just take out the money to bid for the bid. They can also directly cooperate with the dark hand behind the scenes. With the horned demon in the middle, they should know each other's background. Yin Luo was unable to answer this question. Luo Nan didn't expect to obtain an answer. He quickly raised another question. How can anyone get involved in the Amaterasu order? Let's not talk about the horned demon. Fatty Dragon's background is simple, but Jingxin is a member of the society with a high position. Brain Demon and Horse Monkey are vagrants of the wilderness. The doctrine of education without discrimination, Tianqi True Soul, is just a random patchwork. There's nothing special about it. Snake Tongue's myriad spirit order can be modified and used without a single flaw. Luo Nan had more or less experienced the atmosphere of the Amaterasu Order's headquarters these past few days in Ban City. The management was really quite loose. Large and small overground and underground orders were allowed to grow in Ban City, the core region of the order. For example, Zhuo Wei, a mutant that clearly possessed basic intelligence and had already become the core of a small order, lived next to the residential area and allowed them to do as they pleased. It looked quite impressive, but in Spring City, they had to obtain the holy cloak of the Xia Luo order as soon as possible. They didn't even hesitate to dig up the foundation of the order. Luo Nan still wasn't clear on what kind of logic they followed. Because Luo Nan was racking his brains for the Amaterasu order, the members of the Amaterasu order fell into a rather headache-inducing situation as more and more people appeared to participate in the transaction. Aside from Anthony, Hua Dian, and Gardner, there were other people approaching from different directions and distances. With so many people, it was hard to avoid some bumping and bumping. F***ck me. Black Mist. That bastard who likes to put curses on people. Back in the wilderness, that fellow tormented me until I peed my pants. The horse monkey was thick-skinned. He spoke of his family's embarrassing past like a fart, but the hatred in his words caused the vast, sunny wasteland to seem a bit gloomy. He appeared in a spiritual body state. Jingxin grasped the main point. This fellow is clearly overconfident. You must know that there are 10 people participating in the transaction, including us, right? The horned demon nodded in confirmation. Jingxin continued, most of the 10 people should be on the mental side. They are scheming against the unsuspecting. All of them have the ability to deal with him. It's all too easy for a monkey to take revenge. Jingxin consciously assumed the position of the brains of this 4-man group. He pacified Horse Monkey and reminded his companions of a more critical issue. Pay attention to the motorcycle rider that's following Gardner. I can't see his face clearly right now, but I remember the dagger behind his waist. Cui Qinghe, a swordsman from Ji City. He's proficient in close combat assassination. However, he has another identity. He's an Ablatum Knight. Li Taixing, the secret covenant first Ablatum of the Order of Justice, came to Chan City to negotiate. This person was one of the attendants. Before the horned demon and the others could digest this, they heard another question. Who is this person? The one who spoke was Fatty Dragon. He rarely asked a question. At the same time, he used a secret technique to share the image he sensed with his companions. This backpacker. Is he part of the transaction? At nearly the same time, Luo Nan, who was over 3,000 kilometers away, locked onto the last person. The instant the focus was completed, Luo Nan's pen tip froze. Different people, the same scrutiny, and the natural resistance and pressure in the unfamiliar environment and atmosphere of suspicion caused everyone to naturally distance themselves. They were scattered in an area with a diameter of nearly 100 meters, only surrounding the centaur in the middle. The 3 people from the Amaterasu cult showed no flaws. They were scattered in different directions, intertwining with the other 6 people. Those who knew each other, like Jingxin and Cui Qinghe, nodded to each other. Those who hated each other, like Ma Hou, looked ferociously at the black mist, as if he wanted to devour it. This was not a disguise, but a performance of his true colors. But in the end, all the focus was on the centaur's head, which made the deformed skull in front of his forehead ache. The pressure was huge. But the more it was like this, the more excited the centaur became. In this state, the centaur's craziness was finally completely stimulated. Under his feet was the red earth wasteland covered with wrinkles, but it felt like he was standing on the glorious stage of an opera house. He didn't deliberately face anyone. Instead, he chose to turn his back to the sun, allowing the rising sun to gild his body. Then, he began his speech. Everyone, it's a pleasure to meet you here. Logically speaking, I should have given a passionate speech, but based on the foundation of our relationship, there was basically no need for that. As I have written in advance in the instructions for the secret visit auction, this is a transaction of one is willing to take the hit, and the other is willing to take the hit. In this transaction, I may be a shameless robber, but I may also be an idiot who buys the casket and returns the pearls. You may spend a huge sum of money to pay the deposit, but you may also find a treasure that will make people envious. At the end of the day, this is a transaction full of gambling. It is an exciting and unhealthy relationship. So, I must say the ugly words first. I must confirm again that you all already understand the background of this transaction. At this time, Gardner, who was wearing a leather coat and sitting on the hood of the off-road vehicle, raised his hand like a good student, indicating that he had something to say. The centaur gestured for him to speak. Gardner's skin was a weather-polished dark red, and he wore sunglasses. His whole body was dark under the sun, but when he grinned, his teeth were white and very eye-catching. And his words seemed to be even more attractive. The background you are talking about, are you referring to the lucky incident of being a flag-waving minion, but accidentally signing the final large auction commission agreement? As soon as he said that, sparse laughter came from all directions. Some were serious, and some were not amused, and the people who laughed included Jingxin and Horse Monkey. What if * king good acting skills? Chapter 751. What an inexplicable fellow. 3,000 kilometers away at Beishan Lake in Ban City, Luo Nan rapped on the table, issuing a ridiculing evaluation. Yin Lo, who was combing through the information, raised her head. Which one? It's that black mist. It's a perfectly fine soul body, but it's turned into billowing smoke. Sir, the soul body of our order of black mist is actually. That's the inevitable result of the interference between soul strength and the body. But this fellow is purely using a smokescreen. He's deliberately mystifying. He's got nothing better to do. Luo Nan slapped the table. He wouldn't tell Yinluo that he was vexed because he needed to expend extra brain power to imitate this meaningless appearance. It was also because of this emotion that he could not stand the Black Fog's methods in other aspects. So he had to refute it. Luo Nan hastily drew a simple diagram in the work area. He grabbed the key link and fiercely criticized it. In essence, the soul-body state of the black mist was a disturbance wave that continuously radiated outwards, causing the order of the surrounding mental and material structures to go out of harmony. Therefore, it was chaotic and disorderly. There were no rules to speak of. The more it was like this, the more the core of the soul-body needed to maintain a balance. The black mist adopted a method of chaos on the outside but tranquility on the inside. There were two layers, the surface layer and the inside layer. The surface layer could toss about freely, while the inside layer was calm and tranquil. The advantage of this was that it was relatively stable. It wouldn't turn into a lunatic from the backlash of the chaotic disturbance waves. But the chaotic and disharmonious fluctuations flowed on the surface. The intensity of the interference between the mental and material planes couldn't rise. The information says that the black mist is proficient in curses. It's not good at attacking fortifications. This is the problem it was born with. This fellow really should study the knowledge of configuration in depth. He also needs to improve his courage and insight. What's the point of compromise and balance? Put more effort into the domain of real logical configuration. It seems chaotic but it's stable. It seems moving but it's static. Realize a kind of dynamic balance like a storm vortex. Won't its power increase instantly? This way, it's easier to form a resonance with the storm of the abyss region. You're using the wrong frame of reference again. Yinla didn't dare to say the words of ridicule in her mind. She didn't quite understand why Luo Nan wouldn't let go of the black mist, but she didn't have the obligation to plead leniency for this complete stranger. Luo Nan's criticism didn't affect him from doing proper business. Right now he was comparing the structure of the black mist's soul body. He imitated the disharmonious disturbance wave state vividly. As for whether the inner layer would choose static or dynamic, there was no need to think too much. He would definitely strive for perfection. In any case, the people outside all felt the same. Well, without the corresponding dye, the color of the black fog is a little lighter. I hope it won't be seen through soon. Soon, the black fog spirit body reappeared on the wasteland, and the simulation was 70% to 80% similar. Of course, this imitation was an interference creation of the soul cloak, a tool that could be remotely controlled. It was still fundamentally different from an out-of-body spirit. The work was a little rough, but the timing wasn't bad. Just as the imitation was completed, the raven that acted as a surveillance carrier flapped its wings and flew past. Luo Nan originally didn't want to be in such a rush. He had already sent Yinla to purchase raw materials. He was prepared to make Rue Wen go through the trouble of setting up a transmission array in this wasteland and teleporting her fleshly body once more. This way, he could lock onto the coordinates of his grandfather's laboratory and conduct solid research and exploration. However, the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. The centaur actually married 2 people. After selling the official coordinates to the Toyama auction house, he squeezed out the remaining value from it and fooled a group of people to come over. Luo Nan certainly couldn't just sit and watch. It was a coincidence that he chose to enter as the black fog. He also had some helplessness. Coincidentally, this black fog was more suitable for him to temporarily impersonate. He didn't need to go through the link of the transmission array. He was helpless because of Dean Wan Ta Wan's sudden appearance. Luo Nan still didn't understand why Wan Ta Wan would meddle in this matter. However, he was fully aware that this staunch materialist's sensitivity towards the changes in the material world was simply outrageous. The condensation ring as the foundation of the soul cloak had an effect on the water molecules in the surrounding environment. Others couldn't sense it, but it had already attracted Dean Wan's attention, just like Luo Yuan did a few days ago. Luo Nan still wanted to cover up a bit before clarifying Dean Wan's position. The necessary and unnecessary disguise was completed, but Luo Nan was a bit vexed for a time. What should he do next? The standard answer was to find the entrance to his grandfather's laboratory, to explore and protect it. However, the current situation was that Luo Nan had started searching long before he could analyze and impersonate the black fog. Luo Nan had already done several rounds of investigations while the centaur was spouting nonsense. Presumably, none of the participants were like him. Their perception could easily cover a radius of 300 kilometers. It also spurred his emotions. Accomplishing things was hard, but destroying things was far too easy. It seems that I'm very far away from the mud pool. Even the centaur dares to play like this inside. It should be fine for me to throw a stinky egg far away, right? Within Luo Nan's sensory network, the skinny face that came from Ma Ho's face was suffused with an excited and cruel green light. It was practically overflowing, and Luo Nan felt a wave of annoyance when he saw it. The Amaterasu order, as well as the forces behind them, had the guts to lay their hands on his grandfather's laboratory. They should be prepared to face the consequences. Wait a minute, isn't it too easy for them to just have rotten eggs? Luo Nan suddenly stood up on the yacht Rayan Ban City's Beishan Lake. He walked in circles within the limited deck area of the sunlight area. Yin Luo raised her head in astonishment. She first believed that Luo Nan had encountered some unsolvable problem, but after carefully observing him a few times, she felt that something was off. Looking at that wide grin on his face, he seemed to have fallen into some kind of indescribable excitement and was unable to extricate himself for a moment. Yin Luo opened her mouth, but in the end, she decided to remain silent. This was because Luo Nan had walked a few circles at lightning speed before sitting back in his original position. He wrote vigorously in the virtual work area, sketching out blueprints. Luo Nan was skilled in the application of lines, and he had a vast and broad observation perspective. Therefore, Luo Nan was able to outline the topography of the red earth wasteland over 3,000 kilometers away with just a few strokes. It was hard not to be scribbled, but the necessary details weren't lacking at all. The larger ditches, underground rivers, surface lakes, waterways, and so on were all marked. The range was delineated, and then came the scattered combinations of dots, lines, and surfaces. They endlessly tumbled, wandered, joined, and combined within the virtual work area. The complex structure was constructed within 2 or 3 breaths of time. It even made Yin Luo feel dizzy. The heavens took pity on her. Yin Luo only seriously considered the logical relationship between a few details. She had crammed a lot of knowledge on configuration during this time. Regardless of its practical value, it was a shortcut to get closer to Luo Nan. But what this shortcut brought her was dizziness, and even the structure of her body and soul was about to be shaken and overturned. Yin Luo hurriedly closed her eyes. She didn't dare to look. Clearly, the gap between her and Luo Nan was too great. She was completely unqualified to evaluate on the technical level. She didn't even have the qualifications to review it. Therefore, she could only consider and judge from a more simple and intuitive perspective. Let's first set up a reference. Yin Luo had a hand-drawn draft of Luo Nan's in her hands. Horse Monkey raised his head in shock as he followed the vibrating sound and the angle of the light shadow. He saw a rolling black cloud appear 30 meters in the sky. It was unknown when, but it was dark and gloomy. From time to time, it would change between light and dark. It was as if it had intercepted the sunlight from the vault of heaven, causing it to transform into a dark, treacherous, and extremely ominous color. Horse Monkey! Fatty Dragon's shout came crashing over. Horse Monkey's heart sank, and he felt a little dizzy. It was only at this moment that he suddenly realized that he had been facing this ominous cloud for too long. There seemed to be an invisible attraction inside the dark cloud, hooking his soul, and he could not move away. This is bad. After waking up, Horse Monkey reacted instinctively. Faced with the seemingly harmless dark cloud, he immediately bounced backward, wanting to get out of the shadow formed by the dark cloud. It was also at this moment that a ray of light shone down from the dark cloud. The color was so frivolous that it was like a nightclub spotlight with a spot lens. However, it did not give him any time to think or react. It hit its mark. Horse Monkey was momentarily dazed. He leaped backward, which he would not make a mistake even if he had done it hundreds or thousands of times, inexplicably turned into a ridiculous and laughable diving error. The world spun around him, and then his face was forcefully smashed into the dry, hard red soil. It's a curse. Horse Monkey was glad that he could still make an accurate judgment, and his state of mind was still fine. Against the black mist, this was an acceptable price to pay. He did not even think about his ridiculous mistake. Instead, he rolled on the ground and adjusted his posture. At the same time, his soul power reached into the abyss, and he prayed to the Fusang divine tree that was already in position. The Fusang divine tree system of the Amaterasu cult was said to have 10 parallel suns. Each sun will represented a stairway to the heavens of the divine treasure. Even most of the believers, including Horse Monkey, could not reach the highest level of the ladder to receive the supreme divine treasures into their bodies. However, even the branches, leaves, and roots that had absorbed a little bit of divine power still possessed power that ordinary aptitude users could not imagine. Horse Monkey had chosen the path of exorcism, which was the best choice against the Black Mist. Against a spiritual expert like the Black Mist who was proficient in curses and attacks without form, there was no need to consider a fair duel. He had to use the most direct and effective method to crush it with absolute advantage. Horse Monkey had absolute confidence. Even though he was slightly weaker than the Black Mist back then, after joining the Amaterasu cult and receiving the blessing of the Fusang divine tree system, even if he had a bad start, he could instantly increase his strength level and counterattack. Moreover, he was surrounded by Fat Dragon, a powerhouse who stood at the top of the architect level. As long as he could hold the situation back, Fat Dragon could suck the dark cloud and black mist into his stomach. Chapter 753. The prayers on the spiritual level, the physical mudra, and the secret words had all been uttered. However, the coordinated movements of body, mouth, and mind, which should have been one, had inexplicably turned into a clumsy performance. No matter how casual the Amaterasu cult was, the power of the fundamental system of divine treasures was not something that could be easily summoned. Maho did not even understand why his most secretive thoughts would instantly jump to a completely irrelevant and absurd concept. He had already lost his last chance to link with the system of the Fusang divine tree. The follow-up attack of the black fog arrived. Countless cursed rays rained down on him like a storm, crashing into his body and his mind, drowning him in an instant. Initially, Maho still wanted to struggle, but under the effect of the curse, his sense of coordination and balance had been completely destroyed. Any slight exertion of force would result in a conflict with the movements of the upper and lower parts of the body, and it would lead to unpredictable consequences. His struggle had become a fatal catalyst. In a breath's time, he had completely fallen into a disorderly nightmare from the inside out, from his soul to his body. Every muscle was twitching and trembling, and every nerve had turned into a dancing snake. There was no logic to speak of. Even though he was stuck to the dry and hard ground, he could still enter a state of extreme excitement. He subconsciously wriggled up and down on the ground, then shivered and lay on the ground, like an old dog that had its final radiance. Save me! Maho could no longer care about anything else. He tried to call for help, but all that came out of his throat were meaningless grunts. He wanted to project his thoughts to the internal communication network, but his mind was also messed up by the swarm of distracting thoughts. If this continued, Maho suspected that the structure of his body and soul would fall apart at any time. Before that happened, his will was already on the verge of collapse. Suddenly, a bang sound exploded in his ears. The horse monkey had no idea where he came from, but right after that, the endless rays of cursed light were suddenly cut off. It seemed like it. The horse monkey's senses had dropped to the lowest point ever since he was born. He could only vaguely feel that his chaotic, disordered, and disorderly state seemed to have been alleviated. The stench of saliva, blood, and mud on his face finally stimulated his corresponding senses. Of course, there was also the feeling of stickiness. Maho didn't even need to look in the mirror to know that his snot, tears, and blood were mixed with mud on his face. He subconsciously turned over, and he actually succeeded. Sunlight shone down, and the shadow that covered his body and soul in the middle had disappeared at some point. And the power that ultimately killed him would likely have originated from him. Anger, humiliation, and fear, negative emotions surged as they constantly drained Maho's energy. He had no intention of getting up. At that moment, Jingxin urged him. Are you feeling better? If you are, get up and get to work. Go f*** king die. Jingxin wasn't angry. Were you beaten up by the black fog again? Alright, let's be serious. Go take a look at the spot where the black fog was previously. Look at what? Remember the horn demon speculation. At present, Fat Dragon hasn't caught the black fog, but that fellow has been circling the vicinity without leaving. This doesn't match his cowardly personality at all. Perhaps he really discovered something. Don't be fooled by the fact that he's hiding somewhere. Once we dig out what he's trying to hide, I guarantee he'll jump higher than anyone else. Ma Ho's face twitched. Regardless of his mood, he had indeed heard what Jingxin said. Jingxin struck while the iron was hot. It's not appropriate for me to appear. It's ideal for an enemy like you to go. Don't worry. Fat Dragon and I will protect you. None of your business. Ma Ho spat and spat out the remaining filth in his mouth. He took off his shirt, revealing his thin torso. He wiped his face with the corner of his barely clean shirt, clenched his teeth, and walked towards the target area more than 10 kilometers away. At the end of the day, he was still a B-class expert. Moreover, he was the type of person whose mental and physical aspects were more balanced. When he lost his coordination, he was in a more miserable state. This was equivalent to losing his greatest advantage. From this perspective, the black fog did have a certain restraining effect on him. However, when he regained his senses and adjusted his recovery speed, it was still quite shocking. At the beginning, he was still dragging his muddy steps, and it was difficult and sluggish. After adapting to the 1-kilometer distance, his speed increased rapidly, and he soon recovered his agile and nimble body movement. Other than the sour smell all over his body, which he could not get rid of immediately, and the obvious stains on his crotch area, he was a good man again. Furthermore, during this process, Jingxin had also sent an olive branch. Ah no, it was the propping mulberry tree's branch. That fellow had learned from the horse monkey's lesson and completed the prayer a long time ago. He established a connection with the Fusang divine tree, in the abyss area, guiding its power and assimilating it. At this moment, he connected with the horse monkey and shared a portion of his perception. He could also use the power of the Fusang divine tree to help the horse monkey gradually stabilize its emotions. When they were still 2 to 3 kilometers away from the target, Jingxin suddenly said, "Something's wrong." Black fog. The horse monkey's hair nearly stood on end. No, it's just that the feeling here is very different from other places. It's as though some power has interfered with it. There are remnant traces. Horn demon is indeed a spirit medium. Yes, the black fog isn't bad either. It really made him discover a problem. Jingxin was somewhat excited. The horse monkey finally jumped out of the shadows of the black fog and thought of the most important mission they had come for today. Is this the laboratory's door? Yes, it's still too early to make a conclusion. We need to observe further, but the possibility is very high. Jingxin analyzed the black fog's behavior in passing. That fellow, the black fog, came for Luo Yuandao's laboratory, but it wasn't willing to take the risk. However, after passing by and seeing some clues, it dispelled the thought of leaving and wanted to monopolize it. This is very much in line with the thoughts of a treasure hunter, but it's not the thoughts of an appraiser. Yes, it's quite reliable. Jingxin gave his analysis a thumbs up before contacting the horn demon. Quick, come over and take a look. Let's see if it matches. In a blink of an eye, he said to the horse monkey, "Be careful. The black fog might jump out at any moment." However, Jingxin's judgment was wrong this time. The black fog didn't appear again, as though it no longer had any thoughts about this place. Or perhaps it had suffered an incurable injury from its previous battle with Fat Dragon, fat dragon, who had failed in his pursuit, couldn't make a judgment either. He had completely lost track of the black fog. Jingxin analyzed again, perhaps it's afraid. Your relationship with Fat Dragon will likely be exposed. Your identity can't be hidden anymore. Thankfully, everyone knows that he doesn't like to use his brain. It's very normal for him to have someone as his secretary. However, you aren't very competent as a secretary. I'm going to kill him. This him was naturally referring to him. When the horse monkey didn't see the black fog, his terrible emotions surged again. He paced back and forth on the red ground that didn't look any different. He was extremely vexed. His footsteps became heavier and heavier. Finally, he couldn't help but stomp his feet to vent his frustration. 1 kick, 2 kicks, 3 kicks, there was a muffled sound, and the red soil under his feet suddenly collapsed. Before Horse Monkey could regain his balance, there was another long "chi" sound, and hot steam gushed out. Although it was not enough to hurt Horse Monkey, who was a B-class expert, it still gave him a fright. His crotch instinctively shrank back and he jumped back. What's that? You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.